Hello, welcome to Flap TV. We're the area's largest Facebook group dedicated to politics. Fitchburg-Leominster. All politics jumps from your computer screen to your television screen. Our guest this episode, on the left, LeMar from Leominster, and on the right, Wiggs from Fitchburg. Issue 1, on December 5th, voters in the Worcester Middlesex District chose Dean Tran to be their next state senator. Tran, who is a Republican, is the first Republican to win that seat in over a quarter century. Why did the Democrats lose that seat, Cindy?
My personal opinion is it was the alignment with Maura Healey and Elizabeth Warren sent Sue way over to the left, and I think that's what did it.
Chris?
I think you had a combination of election fatigue, as there was some downturn in voter turnout. I also think, from my own experience having worked on campaigns before, where people can vote geography, you had a split in the Leominster vote, and where you had such a small margin of victory for Dean. I think the fact that both Frida and Sue were from Leominster, pulling 1,000 votes for Frida played a significant role in this.
Wiggy?
I think people didn't really get the change they expected with Obama. And so I think they're looking for change in other places and just getting, choosing different candidates all the way around.
Michael?
He's a popular guy and he got a lot of votes. These Republicans, every time they win something, it's, oh, now we've had a realignment. And they're all going to come through now, and they're all going to come through in droves. It's like, it's a popular guy, got a lot of votes. Mary Padula won several terms as a state senator. People didn't even think of her as a Republican. She was just a popular local politician who was local. So, I mean, he good guy, runs really strong in his city council election, always one of the top voters, if not the top one, in the top two when he runs for city council races. No, it's not overthinking.
Well, I mean, I think we've seen this. We've seen this before. If you want to know where we're going, look at where we've been. And you can look at this on a micro level also of what's going on the national level. We saw the youth be engaged after the Vietnam War, right, on the local, on the federal level, where they dragged the Democratic Party to the left, and they nominated George McGovern, who lost 49 out of 50 states, and then they nominated Walter Mondale, who lost 49 out of 50 states, and then they nominated Michael Dukakis, who won a handful of states. And then Bill Clinton and Al Gore formed the DLC, the Democratic Leadership Council, which had the sole purpose of moving the Democrats toward the center and reach back towards the center. And that became the renaissance of the Democratic Party, and that's where they were successful. Right. And then here on the local level, right? So let's take that to the local level, where we saw for the last 25 years, it has been Democratic representation from Bob Antonioni and Jen Flanagan, but both of them have been centrist Democrats.
Exactly.
They were center on taxes, they were tough on crime, they were centrist on social policy, and they were supporters of the Second Amendment. And then in this race, I think to Cindy's point, not so much with Liz Warren, but with Maura Healey, we saw, especially in the flap debate here, the Democratic candidate moved far to the left, and they lost.
Yeah.
And they lost. Isn't that what we see on the national level, the state level, the local level, Chris?
I've watched that debate, and I don't know how far to the left I think she went. When I watched the debate, I thought one of Sue's shortcomings wasn't so much a policy standpoint as it was a presentation. We're in a kind of a weird juncture in America right now where populism is on the rise, and I think that was something that Dean Tran was good at capitalizing on, and I also thought he was better at messaging in some regards, particularly, for example, when you had the debate and the issue was discussed regarding the sales tax, and he came across saying, well, I'm actually in favor of not only bringing it down, but at some point I wouldn't mind getting rid of it, where she was trying to explain, I actually don't know if we should take it down, and it went on to explain about the importance of services and funding and things like that. And in this era we're in right now, I think that ability to just be like, I want to help you out and get money in your pocket right now works really well.
Yeah, I mean, it's at the level of state senator or state representative, it really is a strength of candidate issue. It really is. I mean, we overthink the whole political angle. Oh, and this one, this is a centrist Democrat, liberal Democrat. Look, I mean, it's all about the strength of the actual person. Okay, sure. The mayors who've gotten elected, Mayor Di Natale or Mayor Mazzarella getting elected in Fitchburg and Leominster. Okay, those elections were not driven by, oh, this one is conservative, this one's liberal, this one's a Republican, this one's a Democrat. Okay, it's just when you're talking about state senate, it really is who's going to be the person that I think will work the hardest and advocate the most? And Dean Tran related better to people. Okay, if Sue Shalafoo were a Susan Collins Republican and moderate and just said, moderate Republican issues, and Dean Tran happened to be a Democrat and said a lot of Democrat hot button issues, he probably still would have won the darn thing. That's my opinion.
Wiggy, you're a Republican. You must be feeling pretty good now.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about him getting in. I don't know how much difference it'll make in our state house. I mean, we don't have, I don't think we have enough on that side to really do much. So I don't know. I mean, it is exciting, but I don't know if it's a big turn or if it's just, a one-off.
So this special election was just to fill the remainder of the term. It's up again next year. Is he going to have a Democratic opponent next year?
A Democratic opponent?
Yeah. Democrat going to put someone up against him?
He'll have one every year.
I'm sure they will.
I mean, a serious one though. Are they gonna take a run at it, or are they gonna say give him a chance?
I don't know. Don't you think the Democrats want somebody else in there?
I would say the Democrats would have to run somebody in there. I mean, first of all, you get an advantage by being the incumbent anyways.
Right.
And when you're up against an incumbent who would have a short term in office, and it was, again, only coming off a 600 vote win, this wasn't a dominated landslide win, it plays to the fact that if the Democrats can put forward the right candidate, they should be able to win. Of course, Dean could do something, spectacular between now and then, I suppose. But no, if you're the Democrats, I think you look at this, see the small margin of victory, and definitely put another candidate.
Any predictions on which Democrat would take a shot at it next year?
None right now.
Yeah, no clue.
Yeah,
No,
I don't. I
no,
don't
go out on a
know.
limb here.
You know what? The two Mikes got a little bit overshadowed just because of the nature, just because of the way things happen. So Mike Mahan, Mike Kushmarek may take another shot at it. I mean, they're not going anywhere, and they're. I think their overall, the way they carry themselves is that sort of same centrist, moderate. I mean, I haven't heard them enough to know what their actual positions are, but it's all about how you carry yourself too, and help what people might think of it. So they could potentially be strong candidates. But I think when we get into this party stuff, we're selling short Dean Tran the person, because this is a guy, again, does great every single city council race he's run in. Okay, works hard, knocks on doors, and has really accomplished a lot. And in a way, I think we're selling him a little bit short by saying, well, he only won because of these various political issues.
Inspiring personal story also. I think that's
Yeah,
something
definitely.
that connects
And
with
I think
people.
he's going to do well enough that even if there is a decent Democrat up against him, I think he'll get the next one anyway. That people are going to give him a shot
I
to really
agree.
make sure that he finishes the term.
I think
and
he'll
see
be
how he does.
stronger after
Yeah,
this.
absolutely.
Cindy's allowed to be right once per episode.
You heard him. You heard him.
Issue 2, Massachusetts State Senate President Stanley Rosenberg stepping aside as Senate President after allegations of sexual misconduct against his husband surfaced. This follows a recent wave, more like an avalanche of allegations of sexual impropriety against public figures, everyone from Hollywood to politicians. We saw Roy Moore just lose that election in Alabama, Democrat elected in Alabama. We see Mario Batali, we see Kevin Spacey. I mean, one after another. It's just, who's next? I suppose the question is this, how much of this is real? How much of this is going overboard, manufactured, and how should it be handled? Where do we go from here with where we're at now and this avalanche happening? Chris?
So, is it all real? I hope that the people who have come forward are all being genuine about what happened to them, because otherwise it sets a potentially dangerous precedent of turning this into a witch hunt. One of the things that concerns me in all of this, and I grant that this is a very thorny issue, the accusation has become enough. And that can present a real danger if just a person has to step forward, accuse you of something, and that's enough. Conversely, though, you have on the flip side someone like Roy Moore, where you've got the accusations and then a pile of other corroborating people confirming his actions. So I don't know, but I'm worried that it could turn into a witch hunt.
Kevin?
I definitely agree with that. I've been concerned about it myself. How far does it go? People continue to be accused, and they're either stepping down. If they're stepping down, that's on their own accord. But if they're losing their job, that before there's any kind of trial, it's a scary thing. It could be, like you said, an avalanche, you know, and how do you come back from that if that continues to happen? I think there needs to be some proof, but at the same time, can you really have somebody represent you in the U.S. Senate that has done these horrible things? You know, you maybe gotta pull them out until they've been proven guilty, you know, or innocent. But I don't know. I think we got to be careful.
Michael?
You know, in the law we have this thing called proximate cause. And I think when we have this avalanche of accusations, a lot of them which should be taken seriously, we might lose sight of some of these. You know, some of these other things get rolled into. I'm not sure if it's fair. What were the first 3 words you said? Stanley Rosenberg's husband, not Stanley Rosenberg. Now, if he aided and abetted, if he participated, if he did affirmative acts or omissions that led to his husband having position to do some of these things that he's accused of, and indeed the allegations turn out to have some merit, that's one thing. But you know what? All I can think of is, you know, this was 10 years ago. There was a murder. This guy by the name of Michael Skakel, okay, he was tried and I believe convicted of a murder of a girl in, I want to say Connecticut. Kennedy cousin. And that's all you heard. Kennedy cousin. And then the commission, here go the Kennedys again. He was a cousin because his sister was married to a Kennedy once removed. It wasn't a direct relationship. He wasn't blood relative to the Kennedys. But this is the problem we have. We have this headline, Stanley Rosenberg's husband. Well, you know what? Now it's guilt by association for Mr. Rosenberg. And other than maybe the questionable call of marrying somebody 30 years his junior, we don't know if he's actually done anything really questionable.
I know it's 2017. I'm not supposed to assume gender, but you're a female, right?
I certainly am.
Okay, so you have a different perspective probably than the rest of us here. You see what's going on?
I do, and I think I admire the women that have come out and have come forward with some of, you know, some of them are just dirty old men. Yep. And they've done this, and they've gotten away with this for years. And women have been intimidated not to say anything because, you know, their careers are on the line. You know, you're in Hollywood. If you don't go along with, or at least flatter these dirty old men, then you know you're blackballed. You can't work. So I think the majority of it is real. I think there's some that are just going to jump in there for their 15 minutes of fame. I get very questionable when I see the Gloria Allreds out there. She's just always front and center with anything that's like, there's money there, there's money to be made. And so I question it, and it's not to say that these aren't legitimate, but I do question all of it. It's like, in the fact that you can make an accusation and literally that person's career is destroyed. Right. They don't even press charges against him. They just make the accusation, hits the news, and now he's a scumbag, and he's just lost his job. And sometimes it might be warranted, but sometimes it's not. So I hope that when people are thinking about this, they're being cautious to say, this really did happen to me. And if it happened to you, then speak out.
Absolutely.
If somebody may have flirted with you and you didn't like it, that's different. That's not a sexual assault. So let's not get carried away with it, and be cautious before you destroy somebody's life, before you make an accusation. But if they did do it, they should be accountable.
By all means.
Where are we going to be setting the hurdle here? Are we going to be setting the hurdle of a person needs to be convicted, or are we going to set it as, well, you need at least, you know, to Chris's point, we had all this corroborating evidence, where you have 5 or 6 or 10 people? Where do we set the standard?
When you start seeing, you know, like Bill Cosby, 20, 40 women, I mean, that's kind of a clue that something really did happen.
I mean, Roy Moore had, I think, 12 or 14. I think Donald Trump is up to like 15 or 16 now.
Bill Clinton had 19.
Yeah.
With Moore, you had objective things like he was kicked out of the mall. Yeah. That's not disputed. And you don't just get kicked out of the mall because for any reason. All right, so it's a totality of circumstances.
Yeah.
You know, when does circumstantial evidence play a role? It really just depends on the circumstance.
Yeah. I mean, also, I would say, too, in terms of where the hurdle is, I think it depends on the position that you're in. If, you know, you're a working for a private company, that's a bit different. That's based on corporate policy and whatever applicable law there might be. But if you're a public servant, it's another matter entirely, because that can affect your ability to perform your job, whether or not your constituents have any faith in you. So I kind of see this as two different things we need to focus on. It's very different in the private sector, but the public sector is another matter, because you are entrusted with a public position as a matter of public trust. And I mean, to your point, there's a lot of scumbags who've
There really
found
is.
out. And I have a feeling that this is probably one of these things that's been going on for a long time, but just because we live in the era of social media and we have phones and we're all connected 24/7, we're just much more aware of it, and people are now feeling more
Now it's
empowered
finally
to
all
come
coming out.
forward.
Yeah.
For the last few years, probably the last 10 years, we have seen, and I know you're going to deny it, but we've seen a conservative war on women in this country. Whether it comes to taking away contraception, trying to defund women's health services, we've seen the war on women, and now are we now seeing the feminists fight back with a war on men? Are we finally getting the culture war that Pat Buchanan promised us in 1988 when he ran for president? And we're going to have this big culture war, but then the internet came to being and everyone wanted to make money instead, so it was kind of put aside. Are we going to have the culture war now?
I would say maybe. I mean, there's no doubt that there are, let's say, fringe elements of the feminist movement who definitely view men as the enemy. They don't like you. There are definitely men who don't like women. They view them as the enemy. I don't know if it's going to go quite that far, at least anecdotally speaking. Most people I know are still able to recognize that, if X guy is a bad guy, that doesn't mean like my male friend is a bad guy, and same thing for women. But I do think it in the here and now, among people I've talked to, there are a lot of guys I know in particular who are like terrified to be alone with a woman they're not related to at this point, because they're afraid of what they could be accused of, precisely because, to backtrack, that accusation is becoming enough.
Yeah, that's the scary part. That's the scary part.
So maybe, or people are just going to start kind of distancing themselves out of fear of the accusation.
I think I think this is all just coming to a head. These women are coming forward because they're just being empowered. They're like, this happened to me, and I'm going to get out there. Eventually, you're going to see this simmer down, because they'll all be outed, and hopefully it will stop. They'll stop doing it. And I agree with what you said. Actually, there are a lot of old school, guys that think women are at their disposal. They didn't think anything about smacking you on the ass or something and think they could get away with it. Nowadays, women would be like, did you just touch me? Back then it would be like, oh, they all do it, just ignore it, and it's you shouldn't have
But
to.
we really buy this that 40 years ago someone got touched on the tush and now they're traumatized for the rest
Well,
of their
no,
lives.
I mean, that's come on. I think that's ridiculous myself.
I wasn't informed that we were allowed to say the A word on television.
Yeah, she's gonna hear about that.
Yeah,
All right.
Forgive me.
All right, that's the last word. That's okay. Issue 3. The U.S. House of Representatives have finally passed the National Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act, which compels states to recognize concealed carry licenses that were issued in other states. The bill now heads to the United States Senate. Do you support this bill, Kevin Wiggs?
I absolutely support it. Being a gun owner myself, when you try to travel with your firearm and go from state to state, it's a scary thing to travel with it, because you have to make sure that you're following every single law in every state. So one state, you have to take the magazine out of the gun and keep it in your glove box, and the gun has to be locked in the trunk. In another state, it can all be put together and you can travel like that. I think it's a good thing overall, yeah. I think it's good for the Second Amendment and for traveling.
Michael?
Whatever. Why the heck not? These gun folks. You want to make it easier to play with your toys? Fine. It's just go ahead, pass it. Go.
I'll take it.
We got 26 other amendments to the Constitution and 7 articles, I believe, or 8. So I mean, but that one amendment, boy, go, fight to the death for that one. Yeah, yeah.
We should be fighting for all of them, shouldn't we?
Well, yeah, you're preaching to the choir on that one. Yeah.
Well, I think because the Second Amendment really kind of has been under attack with a lot of these, mass shootings. People are, guns, 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 and it's like we're seeing killings happen in various ways. And so the attack on the guns, people, they're fearful. They don't want to lose their guns. I agree with this act. I think of it very similar to having a driver's license. You have a Mass driver's license, you go drive all over the country. If you have a license to carry in Mass, you should be able to carry it anywhere you go. You're a licensed person. So I agree with it.
Chris, do you support the National Reciprocity Bill?
In its current form, no. I actually don't think it's a bad idea, the general part of it, but there are some concerns I have with it, particularly where you have such widely divergent standards for what it takes to get a concealed carry, who is allowed or not to have a concealed carry permit in different states, and this bill, or at least as it's currently constructed, doesn't set up any kind of standards to address those varying standards. It basically leaves it to the states, and I see some flaws in it that make me concerned. So in its current version, no.
What would you like to see as standards?
I'll give you an example. One thing that I think would be good to address under current federal law, for example, you can't have a concealed carry permit if you are convicted of, assaulting your spouse. But that applies to your spouse, not your boyfriend, not your girlfriend, not your domestic partner. So you can be convicted of assaulting your girlfriend and still get a concealed carry permit. So I see that as a potential issue that could negatively affect some groups where some people maybe shouldn't have a concealed carry if you are convicted of a violent crime, but you can be because you work with your wife or your husband. So I see that concerns me under the current bill.
I know a woman who was actually having an argument with her husband. It was actually her ex-husband, and they were arguing about their child. And I can't remember exactly the steps that happened, but it had something to do with he was trying to pull the car seat from her while she had the baby in her arms. And so to make him stop basically he was fighting with her, she kicked at him. And he called the cops and said that she assaulted him. Right then, that would make her unable to own a firearm under the federal law that you're talking about. So I don't know that I agree with that, but I do think that it's not a bad idea to have a certain set of standards that are across the board. So they say, for the federal reciprocity, these 5 things or these 10 things have to be met in order to allow it to happen. I don't know that allowing a state that has constitutional carry should be allowed to go, say, to Massachusetts, who doesn't have that. I don't know. I just don't know how you make all that play out well.
Well, isn't national reciprocity? Isn't this just going to get rid of concealed carry permits anyway? Because if you have the constitutional carry states, we have New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, all constitutional carry. You don't need a concealed carry permit, right? You have a constitutional right to carry a gun, so there are no permits. So if they can come into Massachusetts now, they're being held to a much lower standard than the residents themselves. So isn't that going to be challenged down the line? Doesn't this just get rid of licenses which are really redundant to begin with?
This doesn't really guarantee that the states are going to allow it anyway, does it? Just because the federal government says it's okay doesn't mean that Massachusetts is going to be like, okay, we're going to let you do that. We're going to let you come from Arizona and drive into our state with your gun.
Yeah, that's what this bill does.
Yeah.
It forces the states to do it? Yeah. So the states no longer have their
correct
own ability to
and that would apply to states that don't even have licensing laws. So, you know what I mean? That if you carry a gun wherever, and
right, you don't need a concealed carry. You don't need a gun license in New Hampshire to have a gun on you to conceal carry a gun.
It's just the hypocrisy on this whole issue just drives me nuts. These same groups that are pushing this stuff, they're all about states' rights when it's convenient to them. All right.
That's exactly what I've been saying.
And it's like, okay, well now that goes out the window. And the Constitution, the Second Amendment. Let me tell you something, okay? With Republicans and those who do their bidding for them. All right, let me give you a
Pointing
brief.
at me?
Ah, he just did.
Brief history of this amendment that you hold above all the other 20. All right, Nixon wanted to get rid of handguns. Okay, Nixon, conservative Republican Richard Nixon wanted to ban handguns. Jerry Ford had no use for them. Okay, Reagan had quotes where he said, I don't mind, defending the right to bear arms for sport and self-defense and whatnot, but this whole concept of this right to bear arms to go against this tyrannical government, that is a Wayne LaPierre National Rifle Association invention that's happened in the last 15 years. The Supreme Court cases that you have cited on the flat page ad infinitum, that Supreme Court case was a 5-4 decision that's barely a decade old.
Are you saying that the Second Amendment was written 15 years ago?
No, what I'm saying is that this revisionist
about
history has only happened with the current NRA and Wayne LaPierre. And look, I believe in the right to bear arms, okay? I grew up around firearms, and I know how to shoot a firearm, okay? I'm not saying that firearms are the enemy. But you know what? This is just more down this slippery slope of just this revisionist history, holding the Second Amendment above all others, and losing sight of the forest for the trees.
You did okay, but I do remember the last time we went to the range, I had to go to my first aid kit.
Yeah, right.
So what
Did you put your finger up there?
Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Republican Kevin's going to respond to this, I assume.
I just want to say, to your point, one of the things that always fascinates me about my conversations with people who are gun owners. Now, to be full disclosure, I don't own any guns. I've shot guns, I've gone to gun ranges. I actually enjoy firing with guns. I don't own any. But I'm amazed at how the Second Amendment is so sacrosanct. It is considered wrong on any level to have any kind of limitations or restrictions whatsoever when we have limitations on every other amendment in there. But the only one people can't tolerate any restrictions on is the Second Amendment.
And it's really only the last 20 years that we've gone nuts. This whole concept, if you had gone back in time to 1974 and said, and you went in front of the Supreme Court and actually spoke the words, the point of the Second Amendment is so that you can rise up against the government if they get too powerful, which is like the accepted reasoning now. They were, all 9 of them would laugh in your face.
Even the NRA supported the bump stock, banning bump stock. So let's not say it's completely unadulterated. But if you want to bring hypocrisy into it, if you think it's hypocrisy on the National Reciprocity Bill, I'll be glad to have that debate with you, Michael, because there is hypocrisy.
Right.
I'll give you that point.
Thank you.
There is hypocrisy from you and from you. There is hypocrisy on this. And you know why? Because for the last 15 years, going through the courts, you guys have been waving around the Constitution, talking about the full faith and credit clause in Article 4 and due process and equal protection in the 4th and 15th Amendment when it came to marriage licenses. Okay? You waved around the Constitution.
You people.
You waved around the Constitution, and I agree with you.
Great.
Okay? That a state should recognize a marriage license from one state to another. But all of a sudden, now when it's gun license instead of marriage license, oh well, never mind the Constitution because, we're going to throw the constitutional principles away.
Well, marriage license is a bad analogy, but if you want to bring an analogy, how about driver's licenses?
How is it a bad? Right, it's recognized from one state to another.
Where you got to have a road test, where you have to have an eye test, where you have to have a written exam, where you have to have permits.
And if you have a driver's license in Massachusetts, you can drive to California, you can drive to Florida. You don't have to. It's recognized everywhere.
Yeah, and you find me a state where they can just where they just say, here's your driver's license, here you go, rubber stamp it, here you go. Go kill a family of 6.
We're talking about the National Reciprocity Act of recognizing a license issued in one state in another state.
And it works.
You argued from a constitutional standpoint that we should be recognizing marriage licenses, which I agree with. Okay. I agree with both. I'm consistent. Why aren't you?
Well, first of all, I mean, this is a flat false equivalent. Nobody got a marriage license and shot up a church. Okay, that's not. You can't take your marriage license and kill somebody with it. I mean, you can give them a paper cut, but that's about it.
Have you seen some of these people's children?
But I will say this. Here's the thing, though. As I said earlier, I actually don't think the National Reciprocity Bill is a bad idea. I'm not actually opposed to the concept of it.
Christmas is coming. Christmas is coming. Christmas lights, right? Clear lights or colored lights?
Colored. What kind of question is that?
Colored.
Colored lights.
White.
White. Bye.